We're going to go straight into the second presentation, and then we will finish off this session with a Q&A. So I hope that works out for everybody. Neil actually already introduced you, so I guess I don't really have to. But this is Joanna Ball. She is from the Directory of Open Access Journals, and she'll be talking about moving the needle, addressing inequity in global open access journal publishing.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here this afternoon, the last person between you all and the reception. So I'm sorry about that, and I've got loads of slides, but I'm going to try and be as enthusiastic and as controversial perhaps as possible to try and keep you with me. And it's great to be back here at IFLA. I was involved with IFLA many years ago, and I was actually involved with a new professionals special interest group, and if you look at me you can probably see that was a very long time ago, as I certainly can't class myself as a new professional now. So Nils has been talking about the book side of open access, and I'll be focusing very much on the journal side. And of course, open access is very different for journals. It's been going for much longer and is much more well established, as is DOAJ. So before I start saying anything controversial, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to DOAJ, for those of you who perhaps aren't familiar with us. We are an index, so unlike OAPEN, we don't have any content. We are an index of peer-reviewed open access journals. Behind that index, we are an organisation with a wider mission to raise a profile, the visibility, the impact of all open access journals across the world, and that's regardless of their language or of their discipline. Here's our homepage as of a few days ago. This number of the total goes up all the time, and I'm waiting for it to reach 20,000 in terms of the total number of journals in the index, because it's our 20th year. So we will meet that target. So I'm really looking forward to that. So many people use our own interface to access journals, or they access our metadata through other avenues, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And just some very quick statistics in terms to give you an idea of the scale of our work. Every year we receive 8,000 applications and also a number of update requests for the journals in our index. We try and process all the applications we receive within 3 months, and as you can see, we have quite a significant resource to enable us to deliver that work. So 20 kind of paid team members, as well as volunteer editors, and 25 ambassadors. So this is what I'm going to talk to you about today. What's the problem, or what do I think is really the problem with open access? What does an equitable open access journal landscape look like? How can my organisation, the DOAJ, contribute to that? And also a call to action for me and for you to finish off. So what is the problem? Well, we hear all the time about how inequitable open access for journals is. There's new articles all the time talking about how we're moving from a paywall to be able to read to a paywall to being able to publish. We know that open access is continuing to grow, and DOAJ, as the largest and most comprehensive open access journal index, is often used to reflect the reality of the open access journal market today. So we know it's growing. The numbers of applications continue to come in. The use of the APC model continues to grow, and the price of APCs continues to go up, very often in line with the impact factor. We know that those publication costs also exclude many people from being able to publish, and those are researchers from lower middle income countries, early career researchers, or really anybody who doesn't have access to funding. And we know that waivers are problematic and not always the solution. But I would argue that the debate is very much focused on the global north perspective of publishing. If we look at all the transformative deals, all the conversations about read and publish, they're based around a limited number of publishers from the global north, and they fill the space. All these conversations, the money, it takes up all the space that's available. And the APC model has become synonymous with open access, and it really isn't. So I would say it's not open access that's broken, it is the APC model. And all the discussions of waivers and how we can help researchers from low and middle income countries get published in so-called international journals misses the point. So what does an equitable publishing landscape look like? Well, we've heard bibliodiversity mentioned several times today, and I think it is about making sure that we have a publishing ecosystem which represents different countries of origin, different business models, languages, topics, different types of publishers, large, small, so on. We've also heard earlier today some really great examples of bibliodiversity from around the world. I'm just going to add to that list that we have heard. Firstly, from Japan with JStage, which is the platform for scholarly publications there, which provides access to a really high number of publications and publishers, and most of which are available to read for free. We know, and we heard from Latin America earlier today, non-commercial open access systems like Cielo and Redilic are the dominant models there. Moving around the world, Indonesia has a really flourishing open access journal scene, and we actually have nearly 2,500 journals from Indonesia within the DOAJ, so it's the country with the most journals listed. And the Croatian portal, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, also provides access to a large number of journals, and that's just an example of many similar portals that are available across Europe. So we already have a really diverse scholarly publishing ecosystem. It already exists. So we just need to make sure that we look after it, we nurture it, and we help it grow. And this means shifting the conversation so that we're not always talking about impact factors, publishing in the highest prestige journals, we're not always talking about read and publish deals, transformative agreements, and we talk more about a more healthy research ecosystem. And we talk more about community-led and owned publishing. So how can DOAJ contribute to this vision of a bibliodiverse and healthy research ecosystem? Well, we can do that by reflecting that diversity that there already is out there. And this is an image of the geographical spread of the journals that are in DOAJ. It was collected from March of this year, so it's changed slightly since then. In some ways, there are no surprises there. You would expect the UK to have a large circle, but you might not expect Indonesia to. You might not expect Spain to have such a high proportion of open access journals. So we really do have a wide spread of journals, open access journals from across the world. That's important because on many occasions we are those journals' routes to being more visible. So many of these smaller journals, more vulnerable journals, aren't indexed in Scopus or Web of Science or many of the other databases. So half of our journals aren't in those two indexes and are only available in DOAJ. So if somebody wants to find that journal, they will need to do that either by coming to our interface or by using, accessing our metadata through library systems and so on. DOAJ is business model agnostic, so we do have journals that charge APCs. We only have fully open access journals in the index, but 67% of our journals do not charge an APC, and that means they are either diamond, so the cost of publishing are covered elsewhere, not by the reader or the author, or they're subscribed to open journals. DOAJ also raises the profile of non-English language journals. That's also something that we talked about a little bit earlier today. So we index journals in a total of 80 languages at the moment, and we know that Web of Science and Scopus prefer to index or generally index English language journals. So really this is an opportunity to showcase multilingual research. To help journal editors who are applying for indexing in DOAJ, we make sure that our criteria are written in really informal and simple, easy to understand language. We make sure that our evaluation criteria to be included in the index are available in different languages, and we make sure that our team reflects the diversity of the scholarly communications ecosystem. We're also focused on enhancing the visibility of all open access journals. And this is my really simplified version of that very beautiful chart that Niels just showed around how DOAB and OAPEN improve the visibility of open access books. So we take all the metadata that comes to us from smaller, vulnerable journals, from societies, university presses, different parts of the world. It comes into DOAJ and then it goes out to library discovery systems, to services and to advice. I know many of you here, many of the librarians here today use DOAJ in your services when you're talking to researchers about where to find a trusted journal in which to publish. This is the number of hits that we received last year from Summon and Primo, so 56 million hits to DOAJ metadata. And remember that most of those journals won't have the opportunity to be visible through other means. So they rely on that DOAJ metadata to be seen by users and readers. We also work to promote smaller journals. One way we do this is through a new series we started recently called Journal Stories, where we've been interviewing smaller, usually diamond or subscribe to open journals to highlight the great work they're doing. And this first one is available already. It came out in May 2023, and I would encourage you to read it. And you can hear Danuka talk about the role that her journal plays within her in her discipline locally, and some of the challenges she faces as a diamond journal. We've also asked our journals what benefits they get from being within the DOAJ. And we carried out a survey earlier this year on some journals that have been indexed a couple of years ago. They claim that they have a better reputation because they've been indexed within DOAJ, and this has given them that quality stamp of approval, which is so important for them. They also claim that they have increased website usage, more citations, and more submissions as well. So there are real benefits to journals being indexed in DOAJ. Another very important point, which is perhaps slightly different again from books, is around the issue of predatory publishing, and I know we discussed that earlier today. So we, as a trusted index, we fight against the myth that open access journal publishing is predatory. And we do this because we have really thorough criteria. We have an application process that all journals must go through to be indexed within DOAJ, which focuses on everything from their copyright policy to their editorial board to making sure they have an ISSN, digital preservation, all sorts of things. And we've found that the application process and actually being rejected from DOAJ can help improve journal standards across the world. So this is our process for applying to be indexed in DOAJ, and the way that the journal travels through our system. And really the most important bit of that loop is the one at the very, very end, feedback, because we don't see ourselves as being a judge as to whether a journal is good or bad. We see ourselves as essentially an advice service, as a helping hand to small journals that are struggling or want some help in terms of improving the quality of their journal. And we find that loop then goes, that feedback loop goes all the way back, and then a few months later we receive another application, and this time the journal is successful. And this is, as part of the survey we ran earlier this year, this is some comments we got from one of the journals who was rejected at the first instance. And many times we can reject for many reasons. Very often, actually, it happens to be about misunderstandings of copyright and licensing and the difference between the two. So we want to make sure that we keep questionable journals out of DOAJ, and we don't let them get into the index. And so to deal with that problem, the increasing problem of questionable publishers applying to DOAJ to get the quality stamp they want, we have developed a specially trained quality team who now deal with 270 cases of suspected questionable publishing practices every year. So we also provide tools and advice to help smaller journals, inspired very much by the Open Access Books Toolkit that Nils was talking about earlier this year. DOAJ worked with OASPA to launch an Open Access Journals Toolkit. Unlike the Books Toolkit, which is aimed more towards authors, this is more to support journal editors and publishers in terms of how to set up an open access journal, how to put together an editorial board. What do you think about when you think about digital preservation? All of those kinds of issues. And we've had some really good feedback from the community on this, and we're working to translate it into as many languages as we can. So it's already in French, and we have a Spanish and an Arabic version in the pipeline already. Another project that we're involved in is Jasper. A study a couple of years ago showed that between 2001 and 2010, a couple of hundred journals just disappeared from the internet because they didn't have adequate digital preservation. And so to try and address this issue, we're collaborating with Keepers Registry, with clocks and with the Internet Archive to support journals with digital preservation and to find a sensible digital preservation solution. And that the Colombo journal that I was talking to you about earlier for Dinuka, they have used the Jasper project to find adequate digital preservation. And then the final one I want to mention, Publishers Learning and Community Exchange, which is PLACE for short. That's a collaboration with Crossref, and essentially it is a forum online where journal publishers, not just open access actually, but generally, can be in touch with each other to ask advice. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about our ambassador programme, which is where I get to talk about real people and not just numbers, which is really lovely. This is something that we're really proud of in DOAJ. We started it back in 2016 with funding from the International Development Research Centre in Canada. We have now 21 active ambassadors from all over the world. They're incredibly busy, and last year they took part in a total of 95 activities, events, webinars across the world. So we get to meet some of them. And these are the kinds of things they do. So first of all, they advocate for open access. This is Rashali, who's our ambassador in India. She is a library director for an engineering library. She works tirelessly to promote open access, the value of DOAJ, the value of standards. She's also involved in Open Access Asia, and we're currently working with her to try and get DOAJ journals included within the University Grants Commission list of approved journals, so that researchers in India have more opportunity to be able to publish open access and get credit for it. Our ambassadors also support the visibility of their regional journals. And these two ambassadors are Jimena, and who's an academic in Argentina, and Yvonne, who is actually, she's from Mexico but is currently studying for a PhD at Arizona State University. They are incredibly active. Back in 2021, they held, I won't read out the list of countries, and actually some of the countries have been cut off the bottom. So I think Spain, Uruguay were definitely at the bottom as well. So a really long list of countries where they held webinars and seminars to support journals wanting to be indexed. This is Ina from South Africa. She works for the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, and she worked with us back in 2021 to get DOAJ included in the South African Department of Higher Education and Training. And again, the last line is missing, and that's a list of accredited journals. So that means that South African researchers are able to publish in open access journals and again get credit. And then finally, I'd love to show pictures of them all 21, but I know I'll be really unpopular if I make you sit here and see all of them. But finally, I'm going to show you Ikwan, who is an academic in Indonesia. And he also holds workshops and webinars for editors and publishers on the value of DOAJ indexing and on journal standards. So I promised there would be a call to action, and that's as much for me as it is for you. So here it comes. Within DOAJ, we know there is more to do. You may have seen the PKP study that was carried out or published last year, which identified 26,000 journals across the world who are using the Open Journal System software. Back in 2021, the Diamond Open Journal study estimated that there were between 17,000 and 29,000 Diamond journals across the world. We know, so we're falling really short. We've only got 20,000 journals within DOAJ. DOAJ only lists 287 journals from Africa, and we know there are way more than that. And we know that we're missing out on lots of other open access journals from the Global South, which could benefit from the visibility that we can give them and from that kind of stamp of quality that we can give them. So these are our priorities for the next couple of years, and this is in addition to the kind of standard work that we're doing with our ambassadors. So we're going to focus on Africa. We're collaborating with organisations who are active in the area, so WACRAN and IFL, to develop training for journal editors to help them understand more about journal standards and what's required in terms of getting into DOAJ as an index. We're going to advocate for open access and the importance of DOAJ indexing at a decision maker, policy maker level, and that's at Open Science events in Nigeria. I mean, Nigeria is a really good example. We know we've got 23 journals from Nigeria, and we know there are there are many, many more than that. There are loads in open access. I think the PKP study identified 2,500. So we know there's lots of work to do. Not all of those would necessarily get into DOAJ because they might not publish enough, they might not actually be even open access, but we know there's more work to do. And we're also going to extend our African Ambassador Programme to promote OA in the region. So that's me. How can librarians support local journals? And that was also my question earlier today when we were talking about Australia. Well, you can make sure that you integrate indexes like DOAJ into your library discovery system, and so make sure that your users have access to a much more diverse range of content and access to more regional journals. You can also point your users and your authors to more diverse resources via your subject guides. So when you're recommending to your researchers where to publish, also make sure that you recommend open access resources. And also provide advice on DOAJ indexing for your local journals and your institutional journals, because that really will boost their visibility. And I had to put this in. I really love this quote from David Lanks about what it means to be a librarian. And we're not just ticking boxes and delivering a service. We really want to make a difference and make an impact and change the research ecosystem. So how can we influence change? We can do that in lots of ways, and these are just some examples. So strategically, we talked lots about publishing in prestigious journals and about the impact factor and the pressure that academics feel under to publish. And we can question that. We can encourage our institution to question its use of impact factor and rankings, and we can encourage them to sign up to the Coalition for the Advancement of Research Assessment and to DORA. As librarians, we also have a budget. Quite often it doesn't feel like we have a very large budget, but in comparison to other parts of campus, we do have a budget, and we can use that strategically to support bibliodiversity and community-led publishing and infrastructures. And then individually, we all have a voice, and we can all get involved. We can all support our local journals. We can all support infrastructures. So I'd encourage you to do that as well. And now it's only questions and then drinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Niels. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. Yes.
Thank you to both of you for excellent presentation. It was really a pleasure to listen to.
Yeah.
I have a question for Joanna. I'm very impressed with your directory, and I'm very impressed with the way that you ask journals to apply to become part of your directory. But journals can change status. So do you go over the directory sometimes, once in a while, to take out predatory journals if they sort of change status?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned, I think we had 1,700 update requests. So we have, publishers will get in touch with us to update their metadata anyway. But we do also respond to the community if they raise concerns about a particular journal. And we also go back and review our metadata. But of course, as the number of journals in the index grows, the workload involved in going back and reviewing those journals increases as well. So yes, we always need extra resource to be able to do that. But yes, it is something we're very aware of.
Jim O'Donnell, I'm very struck by your gap in number between your 19,000 and change and what you think the universe is. I'm curious what you think is the effect on that gap of the quite specific requirements for listing in DOAJ. I ask this as the publisher of an OA journal that's not in DOAJ for that reason.
Can I ask why you're not in DOAJ?
Cumbersome, complicated. The last time I was just looking, the last time we looked at it, we threw up our hands and said it's not worth the bother.
Okay, that's good feedback. Thanks.
Well, it's 2015.
Yeah. So well, it's probably it's changed an awful lot. We've worked really hard to improve our application form since then. I think we need to make sure that we only allow trusted journals into the index. So it is a really difficult balance. I appreciate that. And we do, I would say that my team go the extra mile in terms of providing advice to journals applying or to answering inquiries from journals that come in around, for example, copyright and licensing. So we can try and catch those things early. We want to make it as simple as possible and as difficult as necessary, I suppose. That's my answer.
Could I make a comment to that as well? Because I think this is something that we also really start thinking about, how to manage this process. Because as DOAB is growing, we know that it's being referred to as a trusted source. So funding decisions can be related without us knowing it. So when I mention in-kind support or be more engaging with libraries, I think this is an area where I would like to see more engagement, so that libraries see these infrastructures as co-owning these infrastructures, as investing in also taking that responsibility about making sure that the level of quality is high. And I mean, we are two small teams to do that, so we need that much larger community. And if we do it well together, then those infrastructures will be very useful and they will grow. And we will feel confident about how what content is there. But alone, we can't, we wouldn't be able to do that unless we have that engagement. So I think we should try and see how we can reach each other and how we can get that coordinated.
It's also been a few years since I looked at it closely, but I'm sort of trying to help, but I didn't really know if I was answering the question I was being asked.
Yeah, I think, should I go first? Yeah, thank you. That's a really helpful comment. And I think we have run sessions. We've kind of run trainer sessions with particular initiatives, so kind of local projects to get more journals indexed in DOAJ. We've also recently appointed a community manager within the organisation who's looking at what we offer the libraries that are able to support us financially. And actually that's a really good idea, not just about how you can... We were thinking about a session around how you can support your users to find things in DOAJ or look for a journal, but actually equally important is how can you support your local journal editors to get indexed. So we'll certainly take that on board.
I could add, typically when libraries or consortia of libraries support us, we have a conversation around setting up a webinar or a training session, so trying to make it bespoke for that consortium. And we also, I mentioned the OA Books Toolkit. it has the author in focus, but actually we've learned that it's really, librarians really like using that toolkit to be sort of the broker in between understanding all that and then giving the information. Yeah. They love it, right? And research support staff as well use it a lot. So so that could also be providing training in diving into some of these aspects, and it's also useful for us because then we give some feedback on what are the real issues, what are the questions that you get that can help us improve those. Next 2 weeks' time, I'll be giving a workshop on that toolkit in the Netherlands in an open science festival. So, I mean, definitely those are activities that are meaningful and how we should engage, I think.
So I have a question, and it's a little different, I think. So you both talked about your ambassador programs, and you both talked a little bit about, Niels, you talked about your boards that you're building for Asia and elsewhere. I'm really curious how you're going about identifying people that you want to sit on those boards. And I ask that because I should acknowledge that I am on the board for IOI. And one of the things that we did a couple of years ago was we actually blew up the existing board and went out and said we wanted to talk to people in a variety of spaces that are kind of adjacent here, and kind of what can we get from them to really build more diversity into the conversations that we're having. And so I'm curious about how you approach bringing people into those spaces with you, and kind of the work you do with them once they're there.
Yeah, so first of all, I mean, I'm talking about a dream of having ambassadors.
Okay.
Joanna's actually having them. So, but I hope we will get there. We have a number of boards and committees. For instance, I mentioned this peer review information service and DOAB quality. We have a scientific committee, and we've been very eager to find representation to that committee globally. And it is a struggle, but I mean, we have a good representative from Malaysia, for instance, or from Brazil, and from, I mean, most parts of the world. But I think we keep coming back to that. And that's also why when I mentioned that we want to engage more with libraries and publishers in Africa and in Asia, it's also to get to know who are the people who would be interested and who see it as a cause. And I think that's really where that ambassador program, which started with DOAJ in was it 2015, has been so successful in actually getting out there, because then you start to find the people locally, which can be very difficult, of course, sitting here in Europe. So, yeah.
In terms of our ambassador program, we started, I think, with proper application system, and we will still put out calls if we identify a need in a particular area. A lot of it is by identifying those advocates who are already in the area making a lot of noise. So I suppose that's the way we've been working with the ambassadors in particular. I'm really interested, and I want to hear more about the blowing up the board, because that's what we're about to do in DOAJ, and actually really look at how we can make sure that we get all the voices around the table. We certainly don't just want the libraries that support us to be sitting around the table, because we also want to make sure that libraries that can't support us are around the table. We need to make sure there are researchers, and there are publishers, and there are funders. So really all the stakeholders, and that's a lot of diversity to pack into a reasonably limited number of people. So I was really interested to hear about the work that IOI are doing with Archive, and I'm hoping I can catch up with Emmy later to talk about that.
Okay, it does not look like there are any other questions, so thank you both for your presentations and your Q&A. This has been a really wonderful conversation, so thank you both. And with that... With that, I believe I hand things back over to Jim and to finish us out this evening.